Today we're discussing adding and subtracting decimals. Adding and subtracting decimals. Fifth grade, one of the biggest things that we see with the problems that we see with adding or subtracting decimals is that we forget to line them up. Okay? So to add or subtract decimals, you need to line them up. To add or subtract decimals, you need to line them up. So to add or subtract whole numbers and decimals, you're going to line up the decimal points. Line up the decimal points. We like to say line them up like fifth graders going to lunch. So line up the decimal points, okay? And the reason we do that is to keep the place values straight. So even when you see problems that look like this, when you see 6 and 46 hundredths plus 387 thousandths plus 4 and 3 tenths. The step one is to stack them up, line them up, okay? So you're going to stack your numbers on top of each other. Have my 6 and 46 hundredths, and then I'm going to line up that decimal point, 387 thousandths, and then my 4 and 3 tenths. So now that they are stacked up and lined up, I can get ready to add, okay? Now, one of the things that I do first so that I don't feel like I'm missing anything is I want to fill in the gaps with zeros. So what that means is like this number goes out an additional place and there's nothing to add it to, so that you feel comfortable making sure that all of your numbers have somewhere to be. I want you to fill in the gaps. Fill in the gaps. Okay? We're filling in the gaps. Anything, if the place values don't line up, then fill in the gaps. That did not change the value. Adding that 0 didn't change the value. You still have 4 tenths. You still have 6 hundredths. Okay? On here, you still have 3 tenths. You have no hundreds and no thousands. So it didn't change the value. It allowed me to keep my numbers lined up. Okay? All right, so let's add them up. 0 plus 7 plus 0 is 7. 6 plus 8 is 14. I'm going to put my 4 and regroup my 1. 3 and 3 is 6 plus 4 is 10 plus 1 is 11. Put my 1, regroup 1. 6 and 4 is 10 plus 1 is 11. Whoops. Oh, I forgot something, guys. Look, that decimal point lined up here, I need to line up my decimal point here. I really should have done that first, okay? You want your decimals all to be in a straight line, like fifth graders going to lunch. They should always be in a straight line. So my answer for this particular problem is 11 and 147 thousandths, okay? So first you want to stack them up, line them up, and then you want to add them up. So stack them up, line up those decimals, and then add them up if you're adding, okay? You're going to fill in those zeros before you add them. Now, another thing that we forget, for example, let's say 7 and 47 hundredths plus 3. Okay? One of the things that fifth graders do often is they want to put that 3 underneath the 7. Okay? So let me show you what I'm talking about. Many times fifth graders want to do this, and then they'll come up with this answer. Now, that is not accurate. This is incorrect. When you have a whole number, that decimal point is after the whole number. The decimal point should be after the whole number. So when you line them up, 7 and 47 hundredths plus 3, that 3 is a whole number. So you want to keep the value of that 3, okay? So I'm going to put my 3 and my decimal point after that 3. I have now stacked them up and lined them up. Now I can add them. Again, if you want to, if you feel more comfortable making sure that you have spaces, those spaces filled out, then you can put that 0 in there for placeholder. Okay? So 7 plus 0 would be 7, and then 4 plus 0 would be 4. Decimal points line up. 7 plus 3 is 10. There's a big difference between 7 and 50 hundredths, and 10 and 47 hundredths. That is, I mean, if you're thinking about money, which one would you rather have? Would you rather have $7.50 or $10.47? So you want to make sure that you stack them up, line them up, put that decimal point behind the whole number, and you want to put that decimal point behind the whole number before you start to add. That way you can line it up in the appropriate place, okay? This again is incorrect. Is an incorrect way to show a whole number because that decimal point should be over. It's here and you need to line them up, okay? All right, stack them up, line them up, fill in the gaps with a 0, and then you may add or subtract. Let's do a subtraction problem. Always interesting when you're trying to do that. Okay, let's do a subtraction. So let's do 3 and 25 hundredths minus 46 hundredths. Okay? Well, because I'm so used to doing it, I stacked them up without even trying. But you can still see that I stacked up my decimal points, and we're going to subtract. Can I subtract 6 from 5? No, I have to go and borrow. Okay, this 2 becomes a 1, and then this becomes 15. Okay, 15 hundredths. 15 hundredths minus 6 hundredths is 9 hundredths. This 4 from 1 cannot do that. I need to go next door and borrow. That 3 becomes a 2, and this becomes 11 hundredths. I'm sorry, 11 tenths. Miss McQueen. 11 tenths. So 11 take away 4 is 7. Decimal point lines up, and then there's nothing to subtract from that 2, so that would be my answer. Okay? What about if we had 20 minus 389? Okay? This is something you would maybe buy from the store. You have a $20 bill. Your decimal point would come after the whole number, so it would be right here. All right? And then your $3.89 would be here, and then you'd want to subtract. In this place, it's really important to put those zeros to hold the place, because now you need to borrow and you need to know exactly what you're borrowing. So this would be like $20 minus $3.89. Maybe you're buying some bread or some meat or a binder or something, okay? And you give them a $20 bill and it costs $3.89. So now we're going to go over all the way over to this 2, make the 2 a 1. 2 cannot give anything over to the end. It has to go next door. So that this becomes a 1, and then this becomes 10. Still, there's nothing here. I still need to borrow. I can't borrow from this 0. So this 0 is going to borrow from here. That 10 becomes a 9. Now this becomes a 10. Okay? Now I can borrow, go next door and borrow from here. Now this becomes a 9, and this becomes a 10. Some of you wonder why I don't go all the way over here and make this a 10 and that a 9 and that at the beginning. You need to see that when you borrow, it goes from one place value to the very next place value, and then this one has to borrow here, so then it goes from here to here, from here to here, and from here to here. This one can't go all the way over to borrow. Okay? All right. Now that we have borrowed, we can now start to subtract. 10 take away 9 is 1. 9 take away 8 is 1. Decimal point lines up. 9 take away 3 is 6. And then 1 with nothing to take away is 16. So if you were at the store, this would be $16.11 that you received in change. Okay? All right. So the first thing you're going to do when you're adding or subtracting is stack them up. Stack up those decimals, so stack them up. Stack up your numbers, line them up, stack them up, line them up, and then you can fill in your gaps with 0 as a placeholder. Okay? Fill in the gaps with the 0 as a placeholder, and then you may add or subtract. depending on your problem. Also remember, when you have a whole number, that decimal point goes behind the whole number. So that's a star. That's something to make sure you have a big star about. So the decimal point goes behind the whole number. Behind, at the end. As long as you write the whole number and then the decimal point, that's fine. So decimal point goes behind the whole number. I think that's it for adding or subtracting whole numbers and decimals, or decimals in general. You want to make sure that you are lining the decimal points up, filling the gaps with zeros, and you'll be good to go.